She was just the cleaning girl, but the director mistook her for the lead supermodel. The alarm shrieked at 4:30 a.m., cutting through the darkness like a knife. Lena Martinez pressed her palm against the cracked phone screen, silencing the sound before it could wake her mother in the next room. Through paper-thin walls, she could hear the labored breathing that had become the soundtrack of their tiny apartment. Each breath a reminder of the medical bills stacking up like tombstones on their kitchen table. At 22, Lena had learned to move like a ghost through her own life. She slipped from her bed, her bare feet finding the cold linoleum floor, and dressed in the same black jumpsuit she wore every day. It was practical, invisible, perfect for someone who cleaned up other people's dreams. The bus ride to Manhattan took 45 minutes, long enough for Lena to study every face in the fashion magazines left behind by commuters. She knew their names, their stories, their rise to fame. Giselle, who was discovered at a mall food court. Naomi, who started as a student in London. Each page she turned whispered the same cruel truth. Girls like her didn't get discovered. Girls like her got forgotten. The Meridian Fashion Studio rose from the street like a glass cathedral, its frosted doors reflecting the city's awakening. At exactly 5 a.m., Lena used her key card, the same one she'd carried for 3 years, and stepped into the lobby. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of perfectly controlled air conditioning and the distant tick of a designer clock. But this morning, something was different. The energy in the building felt electric, charged with an anxiety that made Lena's skin prickle. Call sheets were scattered across the reception desk like fallen leaves. Coffee cups sat abandoned, their contents growing cold. This wasn't the usual pre-dawn calm. This was the aftermath of chaos. Lena pulled her headphones from her bag, the familiar weight of them a comfort against her ears. She'd bought them with her first paycheck, a small rebellion against the silence that usually defined her existence. As Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled her head, she began her routine, pushing her vacuum across marble floors that cost more than her annual salary. She'd memorized every photograph on these walls. The campaigns that had launched careers, the images that had stopped traffic, the faces that had become household names. When she was sure no one was watching, she'd practiced their poses in the bathroom mirror, her reflection fragmented by harsh fluorescent lights. Today, she found herself stopping in front of a new edition, a behind-the-scenes photo from last week's shoot. The model, Ivana Volkov, stood surrounded by a team of artists, her expression bored despite the magic being created around her. Lena studied the way light fell across Ivana's cheekbones, the way her body curved in the custom dress, the way she seemed to exist in a different universe from everyone else. What would it feel like? Lena whispered to the empty hallway, her voice barely audible over the music. To be seen like that. She pressed her palm against the glass, her fingerprint joining countless others that had touched this same spot. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine, to pretend that face in the photograph could be hers, that somewhere in this building, someone was waiting for her to walk through the door. But reality crashed back as her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Doctor called. Need to discuss treatment options. Love you, Mija. Lena's chest tightened. Treatment options meant money they didn't have. It meant more double shifts, more nights spent calculating bills by lamplight, more dreams deferred until someday became never. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the footsteps echoing through the lobby, didn't notice the elevator doors opening with a soft chime, didn't see the man in the expensive suit stepping into her world like a tornado wrapped in Italian leather. Victor Ashford, the legendary creative director, looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot with the kind of exhaustion that came from crisis management. He'd flown in from Milan at midnight, expecting to find his star model ready for the most important shoot of his career. Instead, he'd found chaos. Ivana had vanished. Not just canceled, vanished. No phone call, no explanation, just an empty hotel room and a campaign worth millions hanging in the balance. The client, a luxury brand launching their most ambitious collection, was arriving in 3 hours. The photographers, makeup artists, and stylists were all standing by, waiting for direction. Victor's career hung in the balance. 30 years of building his reputation, and it could all crumble because of one temperamental model. He stormed through the lobby, his mind racing through possibilities. Could they reschedule? Could they find a replacement? Could they? And then he saw her. A figure in black, bent gracefully over a vacuum, her profile caught in the morning light streaming through the frosted glass. The way she moved was poetry, fluid, unconscious, natural. Her dark hair fell like a curtain across her face, and when she turned slightly, adjusting her headphones, Victor felt his breath catch. The bone structure was extraordinary. The way light played across her features, the natural elegance of her posture, the unconscious grace that couldn't be taught or faked. She was exactly what he'd been searching for, not perfect in the traditional sense, but real, magnetic, alive. Finally, Victor shouted, his voice echoing through the lobby like a gunshot. There you are. Lena jumped, her headphones slipping from her ears, Beethoven's symphony cutting off mid-note. She turned to find a man in an expensive suit striding toward her, his eyes bright with relief and something that looked like salvation. Sir, she began, but Victor was already moving, his hand on her elbow, guiding her toward the elevator. I know you're probably tired from the flight, he said, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. But darling, you're absolutely perfect. Better than the photos. The camera is going to love you. Flight. Lena's voice came out as a squeak. I think there's been a mistake. The only mistake would be wasting time, Victor said, pressing the button for the third floor. Hair and makeup are waiting. The client will be here in 2 hours, and after last night's disaster, we need this to be flawless. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, and Lena felt her world tilt on its axis. Through the glass walls, she could see floors of activity, stylists arranging clothes, photographers adjusting lights, makeup artists laying out brushes like surgical instruments. I'm not, she tried again. But Victor was already talking to someone on his phone, his voice rapid-fire and urgent. Yes, she's here. Yes, she's perfect. No, better than perfect. She's real. Lena's reflection stared back at her from the polished elevator doors. Still in her cleaning uniform, still clutching her vacuum handle, still the invisible girl who moved through other people's dreams. But something in her eyes had changed. A spark of possibility, dangerous and thrilling. The elevator chimed softly as they reached the third floor, and the doors opened to reveal a world Lena had only glimpsed in magazines. Racks of designer clothes lined the walls. Makeup stations gleamed under perfect lighting. And everyone was looking at her. She's here, Victor announced, and suddenly Lena was surrounded by a team of artists, their hands reaching for her, their voices overlapping in excitement. The bone structure is incredible. Look at those eyes. She's going to be stunning. Lena opened her mouth to explain, to tell them who she really was, but the words died in her throat. Because for the first time in her life, she was being seen. Not as the cleaning girl, not as the invisible woman who emptied their trash cans, but as someone worth looking at, someone worth transforming. As gentle hands guided her toward the makeup chair, Lena caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her face was pale with shock, her eyes wide with terror and wonder. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, but also like something else. She looked like a woman on the verge of discovering who she really was. The makeup chair was softer than anything she'd ever sat in, and as the artist began to work, Lena felt herself sinking into a dream she'd never dared to dream. But even as foundation smoothed across her skin and colors bloomed on her eyelids, one thought echoed in her mind. What happened when they discovered the truth? The makeup chair felt like a throne, soft leather that seemed to mold itself to Lena's body as she sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might shatter the spell. Around her, the team moved with the precision of a Formula One pit crew, each person an expert in their craft, and she was their canvas. Don't be nervous, darling, said Maya, the lead makeup artist, her voice warm with a slight British accent. I've worked with all the girls. You have something special, a vulnerability that the camera will eat up. Lena wanted to tell Maya the truth, wanted to explain that she wasn't one of the girls, but the words stuck in her throat like stones. Instead, she nodded and watched in the mirror as her reflection began to change. Maya's brushes moved across her face like magic wands, each stroke revealing features Lena had never noticed. Her cheekbones emerged, sharp and defined. Her eyes, always her best feature, became luminous under carefully applied shadow and liner. Her lips, usually bitten and chapped from nervous habit, bloomed into a soft rose. Your skin is incredible, Maya murmured, stepping back to assess her work. So natural, so real. These days, everyone's so overprocessed, so artificial. You're like a breath of fresh air. Behind them, the hairstylist, a tall, elegant man named Sebastian, was preparing his tools with the reverence of a surgeon. Victor wants something effortless, he said, running his fingers through Lena's dark waves. Something that looks like you just stepped out of a Mediterranean breeze. Lena had never been to the Mediterranean. The farthest she'd ever traveled was Queens, to visit her grandmother's grave. But she nodded again, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever spell had brought her here. As Sebastian worked, his fingers gentle but sure, Lena caught glimpses of the studio beyond the makeup area. Photographers were adjusting massive lights, their assistants moving like shadows. The wardrobe team was steaming garments that probably cost more than her mother's medication. Everything was controlled chaos, a beautiful dance of creativity and commerce. You're very quiet, Maya observed, applying a final touch of highlighter to Lena's cheekbones. Are you always this calm before a shoot? Lena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. I'm just taking it all in. It wasn't a lie. She was taking it all in, the luxury, the attention, the way everyone treated her like she belonged here. Like she was someone worth their time and expertise. Through the mirror, she could see Victor pacing near the shooting area, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, she could hear fragments of his conversation. Revolutionary, authentic, exactly what the brand needs. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her supervisor at the cleaning company. Where are you? The morning shift at the law firm is starting soon. Reality crashed over her like ice water. She had other jobs to get to, other floors to clean, other invisible tasks that kept her world spinning. But here, in this chair, with these people treating her like she mattered, she felt frozen between two worlds. All done, Maya announced, stepping back with satisfaction. You look absolutely radiant. Lena stared at her reflection and gasped. The woman in the mirror was her, but transformed. Her eyes seemed larger, more expressive. Her skin glowed with health and vitality. Her hair fell in perfect waves that caught the light with every movement. She looked like one of the women in the photographs on the walls downstairs. I can't believe that's me, she whispered. Believe it, Sebastian said, adjusting a final curl. You're stunning. Before Lena could respond, Victor appeared behind them, his eyes bright with excitement. Perfect, he exclaimed. Absolutely perfect. The client is going to lose their minds. A stylist named Carmen approached with a garment bag, unzipping it with the reverence of someone unveiling a masterpiece. Inside was a dress that seemed to capture light itself. White silk that flowed like water, with delicate beading that caught the studio lights like stars. This is the centerpiece of the collection, Carmen explained, lifting the dress from its protective covering. It's worth more than most people's cars, so we need to be extra careful. Lena's eyes widened. I don't think I should. Nonsense, Victor interrupted. You're going to be magnificent in it. Carmen, get her changed. We're losing light. In the privacy of the changing room, Lena slipped out of her black jumpsuit, her armor, her uniform, her identity, and into the silk dress. The fabric felt like a whisper against her skin, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger. A beautiful stranger who moved with grace and confidence, who belonged in rooms like this. But underneath the silk and the makeup, she was still Lena Martinez, the cleaning girl who had $47 in her checking account, and a mother who needed medicine they couldn't afford. Are you ready? Carmen called from outside the curtain. As ready as I'll ever be, Lena replied, though she wasn't sure she'd ever be ready for what came next. When she emerged from the changing room, the entire studio fell silent. Photographers stopped adjusting their equipment. Assistants paused mid-task. Even Victor, who had worked with some of the most beautiful women in the world, stood speechless. My God, he finally whispered. You're going to change everything. The dress fit her perfectly, as if it had been made for her body. The beading caught the light with every breath, creating a constellation across the silk. She moved like liquid grace, unconscious of the effect she was having on everyone around her. The camera is going to worship you, breathed Paolo, the photographer, stepping forward with his camera already in hand. You have something most models spend years trying to find. What's that? Lena asked, genuinely curious. Soul, Paolo said simply. You can't fake soul. As they moved toward the shooting area, Lena felt as though she were walking through a dream. The lights were impossibly bright, the backdrop an endless expanse of white that seemed to stretch into infinity. Assistants moved around her like attendants, adjusting the dress, touching up her makeup, ensuring every detail was perfect. Just stand there, Paolo instructed, raising his camera. Don't pose. Don't think. Just be. Lena stood in the center of the white space, feeling completely exposed and utterly visible. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her, really looking at her, and seeing something worth capturing. The camera clicked once, the sound sharp and definitive. Then again, and again. With each click, Lena felt something awakening inside her. Not confidence exactly, but something deeper. A recognition of her own worth, her own beauty, her own right to exist in this space. Beautiful, Paolo murmured, his camera never stopping. Now turn slightly to the left. Perfect. Now look at me like you're keeping a secret. Yes, exactly like that. The shoot continued for what felt like hours, but also like minutes. Lena found herself moving naturally, responding to Paolo's gentle directions with an instinct she didn't know she possessed. The dress flowed around her like liquid starlight, and she felt, for the first time in her life, truly beautiful. But in the back of her mind, a clock was ticking. Eventually, someone would ask the right question. Eventually, someone would realize she didn't belong here. Eventually, this dream would end, and she would have to return to being invisible. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her more determined to savor every moment, to burn every sensation into her memory, to be fully present in this impossible, beautiful, stolen moment. Because even if it only lasted one morning, she had been seen. She had been beautiful. She had been enough. And that was something no one could ever take away from her. The last shot had been perfect. Lena could feel it in the way Paolo lowered his camera with a satisfied sigh, in the way the assistants began to relax their shoulders, in the way Victor's tense expression melted into something approaching triumph. That's a wrap, Paolo announced, and the studio erupted in applause. Lena stood frozen in the center of the white backdrop, still wearing the silk dress that had transformed her into someone else entirely. The applause washed over her like warm water, and for a moment, she allowed herself to bask in it, to pretend it was real, to pretend she deserved it. Extraordinary work, Victor said, approaching with a smile that seemed to light up his entire face. In 30 years of doing this, I've rarely seen such natural instinct. You were born for this. The words hit Lena like physical blows. Born for this. If only he knew she'd been born for scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans, for being invisible and forgotten. If only he knew that in 2 hours, she was supposed to be cleaning bathrooms in a law firm downtown. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya appeared beside her with makeup remover and cotton pads. Usually I'd leave the makeup on until after the client sees the shots, she said. But you look so radiant. I think we can afford to let you be comfortable. Comfortable. The word felt foreign. Lena couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly comfortable anywhere. As Maya gently removed the makeup, Lena watched her reflection change back to something more familiar. The dramatic eyes became simply brown again. The sculpted cheekbones softened. The glossy lips returned to their natural pink. But something remained, a glow that hadn't been there before, a confidence that seemed to emanate from within. You should probably get changed, Carmen suggested, appearing with a garment bag. The dress needs to be steamed and stored before. Actually, Victor interrupted, leave it on for now. The client should see her in the full look. Lena's stomach dropped. Client. Madame Rousseau from Eternite, Victor explained. She's flying in from Paris specifically to see the initial shots. This campaign could launch their new collection globally. The weight of the dress suddenly felt crushing. Lena touched the delicate beading, aware that she was wearing months of her mother's rent. That one wrong move could destroy something priceless. I should really, she began. But her words were cut off by the sound of elevator doors opening. The client had arrived. Madame Rousseau swept into the studio like a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her black suit impeccable, her eyes sharp with the kind of intelligence that built fashion empires. She was followed by two assistants who moved with military precision, tablets in hand, ready to document every moment. "Victor, darling," Madame Rousseau said, her French accent lending elegance to every syllable. "I trust you have something spectacular to show me." "More than spectacular," Victor replied, his voice vibrating with excitement. "Revolutionary." Madame Rousseau's eyes swept the studio until they landed on Lena, still standing in the center of the shooting area, wearing the star dress. For a moment, time seemed suspended as the older woman studied her with the intensity of a gemologist examining a rare diamond. "Interesting," Madame Rousseau murmured, circling Lena slowly. "She's not what I expected." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. "What? What were you expecting?" "Someone manufactured," Madame Rousseau replied, her eyes never leaving Lena's face. "Someone polished and processed and utterly forgettable. But you have something real. Something that can't be bought or taught." Paolo appeared beside them with his camera, the screen displaying the shots they'd just taken. "Madame Rousseau, I'd like you to see what we captured." The older woman took the camera, her expression neutral as she scrolled through the images. But Lena could see the exact moment when professionalism gave way to genuine surprise. Madame Rousseau's eyes widened slightly, and she held the camera closer to her face. "Mon Dieu," she whispered. These are extraordinary." Lena craned her neck to see the images and gasped. The woman in the photographs was her, but also not her. The camera had captured something she'd never seen in any mirror. A depth, a soulfulness, a raw beauty that seemed to leap from the screen. "She's perfect for the campaign," Victor said, unable to keep the triumph from his voice. "Natural, authentic, exactly what modern women want to see." "More than perfect," Madame Rousseau agreed. "She's revolutionary." "What agency represents her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lena felt every pair of eyes in the studio turn to her, waiting for an answer she couldn't give. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish drowning in air. She started, her voice barely audible. "I'm not." "She's with Elite," Victor said quickly, but Madame Rousseau was already frowning. "Elite? But I know everyone at Elite. I've never seen her before." She turned to Lena directly. "What's your name, dear?" This was it. The moment of truth. The end of the dream. "Lena," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Lena Martinez." "Lena Martinez," Madame Rousseau repeated, testing the name. "And you work with?" Lena looked around the studio at all the faces watching her. Maya, who had made her feel beautiful. Sebastian, who had called her stunning. Paolo, who had captured her soul. Victor, who had given her a chance she'd never asked for. She thought of her mother, lying in bed at home, counting pills and counting pennies. She thought of her dreams, carefully folded and tucked away in the back of her heart. She thought of all the times she'd stood in front of mirrors, practicing poses she'd never have the chance to use. "I work here," she said finally. "I'm the cleaning girl." The silence that followed was deafening. Lena watched as understanding dawned on face after face. Confusion, then surprise, then something that might have been disappointment. "You're what?" Victor's voice came out as a croak. "I clean the building," Lena said, each word feeling like a stone in her throat. "I've been cleaning here for 3 years. This morning, you thought I was someone else, and I didn't know how to tell you." The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Lena could feel the weight of the dress, the carefully applied makeup, the transformation that had made her feel beautiful for exactly 3 hours. "I'm sorry," she whispered, moving toward the changing room. "I'll get out of the dress and get back to work." "Wait." The voice was Madame Rousseau's, sharp and commanding. "Just wait." Lena froze, afraid to turn around, afraid to see the disgust or anger in their faces. "You're telling me," Madame Rousseau said slowly, "that you've never modeled before? Never trained? Never worked with a photographer?" "No, ma'am," Lena replied, still facing away from the group. "And you created this?" Madame Rousseau gestured to the camera in her hands. "This magic? This authenticity that every model in the world is trying to achieve?" "I don't know what I created," Lena said honestly. I just tried to be myself." Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Madame Rousseau began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full, delighted laughter that echoed through the studio. "Victor," she said, her voice bright with amusement, and something else, excitement. You magnificent fool. You've just given me the greatest gift possible. I what? Victor looked as confused as Lena felt. Don't you see? Madame Rousseau said, moving to stand beside Lena. We've been searching for authenticity for years. We've been paying millions to girls who are trying to look real, to look natural, to look like they haven't spent their entire lives in front of cameras. And you found me someone who actually is all of those things. She placed a gentle hand on Lena's shoulder. Turn around, dear. Lena turned slowly, afraid of what she might see. But Madame Rousseau's face was kind, her eyes bright with possibility. You're not a model, she said simply. You're better than a model. You're real. And in a world full of artificial beauty, real is the most precious thing of all. I don't understand, Lena said. I want to offer you a contract, Madame Rousseau said simply. Not just for this campaign, but as the face of our brand. You'll need training, of course. You'll need to learn to walk, to pose, to work with different photographers. But what you have, that authenticity, that soul, that can't be taught. Lena felt the world tilt on its axis. A contract. A very generous contract, Madame Rousseau confirmed. Enough to take care of yourself and your family. Enough to make you one of the most recognizable faces in fashion. The studio erupted in excited chatter. Victor was beaming like a proud father. Paolo was already planning additional shots. Maya and Sebastian were discussing the possibilities for future looks. But Lena stood in the center of it all, wearing a dress worth more than her life savings, feeling like she was drowning in possibility. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course, Madame Rousseau said. But don't think too long. The world is waiting to meet you, Lena Martinez. And I have a feeling you're going to change everything. As the studio gradually returned to its normal rhythm, Lena found herself alone in the changing room, staring at her reflection. The girl in the mirror looked the same as always. Dark hair, brown eyes, uncertain smile. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer forgotten. She was seen. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. 3 days later, Lena was back in her black jumpsuit, pushing her vacuum across the marble floors of the Meridian Fashion Studio. The silk dress had been carefully packed away. The makeup had been washed off. The contract offer sat on her kitchen table and signed, while her mother's medical bills grew higher beside it. She tried to return to her normal routine, but everything felt different now. The mirrors seemed to follow her as she worked. The photographs on the walls felt like they were watching her. Even the security guard had given her a strange look when she'd badged in that morning. You're being ridiculous, she told herself, adjusting her headphones. It was just one morning. One impossible morning. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the memory of how it had felt to be seen. To be beautiful. To be worth something. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Rosa, who worked at the diner down the street. Girl, you need to check social media. Now. Lena frowned. She barely used social media. Between work and taking care of her mother, she didn't have time for Instagram or Twitter. But Rosa's message felt urgent, almost panicked. During her break, Lena found a quiet corner of the studio and opened Instagram on her phone. Her notifications were exploding. Hundreds of tagged posts, thousands of new followers, messages from people she'd never met. Her heart stopped. There, trending across multiple platforms, was a video titled Behind the Scenes, The Discovery of Lena Martinez. Paolo's assistant had captured the entire transformation, from the moment Victor mistook her for the model, through the makeup process, to the final shots that had taken everyone's breath away. The video had been viewed over 2 million times in less than 24 hours. The comments were overwhelming. She's so real. Finally, someone who looks like us. That transformation is incredible. But she was beautiful before too. This is what authentic beauty looks like. I'm crying. She's perfect. But not all the comments were positive. Mixed in with the praise were darker voices. Just another publicity stunt. She's nothing special. Wait until she gets discovered by Hollywood. She'll be plastic surgery Barbie within 6 months. Lena's hands shook as she scrolled through the endless stream of opinions about her face, her body, her worthiness. Millions of strangers had watched her most vulnerable moment, had seen her confusion and fear and wonder, and had decided to make her their entertainment. Her phone rang. Victor's name appeared on the screen. Lena, his voice was breathless with excitement. Please tell me you've seen what's happening online. I'm looking at it now, she said, her voice small. This is incredible. The engagement metrics are through the roof. Madame Rousseau is beside herself with joy. The brand couldn't have paid for this kind of exposure. People are talking about me, Lena said, the reality of it hitting her like a physical blow. Millions of people are talking about me. And they love you, Victor said. Look at the positive response. You've touched something in people, Lena. They see themselves in you. After ending the call, Lena sat in the quiet corner of the studio, feeling the weight of sudden fame pressing down on her like a physical force. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, each one a reminder that her life had irrevocably changed. She thought about her mother, still lying in bed at home, still counting pills and counting pennies. She thought about the unsigned contract that could change everything. She thought about the girl in the video, who had looked so hopeful, so full of possibility. I can't do this, she whispered to the empty hallway. But even as she said it, she knew it was too late. The world had already decided who she was. The only question now was whether she would decide for herself. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from her mother. Mija, Mrs. Rodriguez showed me the video. I'm so proud of you. You look like an angel. Lena stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. Her mother, who had sacrificed everything for her daughter's dreams, who had never complained about the medical bills or the late nights or the small apartment that smelled like disinfectant. You looked like an angel. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Lena stood up, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the elevator. It was time to make a decision. It was time to stop being afraid of being seen. As the elevator doors opened, she caught her reflection in the polished metal. She looked the same as always, dark hair, brown eyes, uncertain smile. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer forgotten. She was viral. And maybe she was ready for that. 1 week later, Lena stood in the wings of the Meridian Fashion Studio's main runway, her heart hammering so hard she was sure the audience could hear it. The black dress she wore was simple but elegant, designed to let her natural beauty shine through. Around her, models prepared for the show with the casual confidence of people who belonged in this world. She didn't belong here. Not yet. The video had changed everything. Overnight, she'd become the face of authentic beauty, the girl who'd stumbled into fame and captured hearts worldwide. Madame Rousseau had fast-tracked her contract, and suddenly Lena Martinez, former cleaning girl, was scheduled to close the most important show of Fashion Week. Remember, Victor whispered in her ear, just walk like you walked that morning. Natural, confident. Be yourself. Be yourself. The words that had started this entire journey. The music began, and one by one, the models began their walk down the runway. Lena watched them move with practiced grace, their faces masks of professional beauty. She'd spent the last week in intensive training, learning to walk in heels, to pose for photographers, to project confidence she didn't feel. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. You're up in 2 minutes, the stage manager whispered. Lena nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience, buyers, critics, influencers, all waiting to see if the viral sensation could translate her online magic to the runway. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Lena turned to find Ivana Volkov standing behind her, resplendent in a silver gown that caught the backstage lights like armor. The original model looked exactly as she had in the photographs, impossibly beautiful, perfectly polished, utterly untouchable. I'm sorry about the confusion last week, Lena said, her voice barely audible over the music. I never meant for. Oh, please, Ivana interrupted, her Russian accent making the words sound like ice. You think I believe that innocent act? You planned this whole thing, didn't you? The perfect little underdog story. I didn't plan anything, Lena protested. I was just cleaning. You were just scheming, Ivana said, moving closer. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? That was supposed to be my campaign. My cover. My moment. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. There was something dangerous in Ivana's eyes, something that spoke of years of fighting for every opportunity, every advantage. I understand you're upset, Lena said carefully. But there's room for both of us. Room for both of us. Ivana laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Darling, there's only room for one at the top. And I've worked too hard to let some little cleaning girl take what's mine. The stage manager appeared beside them. Lena, you're up in 30 seconds. Lena nodded, trying to focus on what Victor had taught her. Head up, shoulders back, let the confidence flow from within. But Ivana stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You know what's funny about viral fame? She said. It disappears just as quickly as it arrives. One mistake, one stumble, and they'll forget you ever existed. Trust me, I've seen it happen. 10 seconds, the stage manager called. Lena took a deep breath, trying to center herself. This was her moment. Her chance to prove that the viral video wasn't a fluke, that she belonged in this world. Break a leg, Ivana said sweetly, and as Lena moved toward the curtain, she felt something catch her ankle. Time slowed. Lena felt herself falling forward, the runway rushing up to meet her. The audience would see her stumble, would witness her humiliation broadcast live to the world. The girl who had captured hearts with her authenticity would be remembered as the amateur who couldn't handle the pressure. But in that split second, muscle memory kicked in. 3 years of navigating wet floors and crowded storage rooms, of moving gracefully in spaces not designed for her. Lena caught herself, transforming the stumble into a fluid movement that looked almost like a dance. The curtain parted, and she stepped into the light. The runway stretched before her like a river of stars, the audience a sea of faces caught in darkness. Cameras flashed like lightning, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the steady rhythm of the music. For a moment, she faltered. This wasn't the controlled environment of the photo shoot. This was live, immediate, unforgiving. Every step would be judged, every expression analyzed. But then she remembered her mother's words. You looked like an angel. She remembered the woman in the video, who had been so afraid but had chosen to be brave anyway. She remembered the millions of people who had seen something in her that she was only beginning to see in herself. Lena lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and began to walk. With each step, she felt her confidence growing. This wasn't about being perfect. This wasn't about being like everyone else. This was about being authentically, unapologetically herself. The dress moved with her like liquid night, and she could feel the energy of the audience shifting. The polite attention became something more electric, more engaged. She wasn't just walking down a runway. She was telling a story. Her story. Halfway down the runway, she caught sight of familiar faces in the front row. Victor, beaming with pride. Madame Rousseau, nodding approvingly. Paolo, his camera capturing every moment. And there, in the back, barely visible but unmistakably present, was her mother. Rosa must have helped her get there, must have convinced her to leave the apartment for the first time in months. Her mother's face was radiant with joy and pride, and Lena felt tears prick her eyes. She reached the end of the runway and paused, letting the moment breathe. The audience was silent, suspended in the magic of the moment. Then she smiled, not the practiced smile of a model, but the real smile of a daughter who had just made her mother proud. The applause was thunderous. As she turned to walk back, Lena caught sight of Ivana in the wings. The other model's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. She had tried to sabotage Lena's moment, but instead had only made it more powerful. Because that's what authentic beauty did. It survived. It thrived. It transformed obstacles into opportunities. Lena completed her walk and stepped back into the wings, where she was immediately surrounded by congratulations and praise. But all she could think about was the woman in the back row, the woman who had sacrificed everything so her daughter could have this moment. That was incredible, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. You've just changed fashion forever. I haven't changed anything, Lena replied, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I've just shown them what was already there. As the show ended and the backstage area exploded with celebration, Lena felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Ivana standing behind her, but the hostility was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like respect. I underestimated you, Ivana said quietly. That was actually beautiful. Thank you, Lena said simply. I suppose there might be room for both of us after all, Ivana continued, extending her hand. The industry is changing. Maybe it's time I changed with it. Lena shook her hand, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about fashion or fame or success. This was about two women choosing to lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. Now, Ivana said, her smile becoming genuine for the first time. Let's go celebrate. I have a feeling this is just the beginning. As they walked toward the celebration, Lena felt the last pieces of her old life falling away. She was no longer the invisible cleaning girl. She was no longer the accidental model. She was Lena Martinez, and she was exactly where she belonged. The transformation was complete. 6 months later, Lena stood in the same lobby where her life had changed forever, but this time, she wasn't holding a vacuum. She was holding a contract, not for herself, but for the Lena Martinez Foundation, a program that would give young women from underprivileged backgrounds the chance to shadow her, to learn about the fashion industry, to dream bigger than their circumstances. The marble floors gleamed under the morning light, and the photographs on the walls told a new story. Her face was among them now, but more importantly, so were the faces of the first group of foundation participants. Girls from the Bronx, from Queens, from neighborhoods where dreams were luxuries most couldn't afford. "Are you ready?" Victor asked, appearing beside her with a tablet showing the morning schedule. In the months since the runway show, he'd become more than her director. He'd become her mentor, her advocate, her friend. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lena replied, smoothing the fabric of her simple black dress. She'd learned to appreciate designer clothes, but she'd never lost her preference for elegant simplicity. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped today's group. 5 young women, ages 18 to 22, all selected from hundreds of applications. They moved with the careful uncertainty of people entering a world that had never been meant for them. "Welcome to Meridian," Lena said, her voice warm with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm Lena Martinez, and I used to clean these floors." The girls exchanged glances, unsure if she was joking. But Lena's smile was real, and slowly, they began to relax. "6 months ago, I was where you are now," she continued. "Invisible, forgotten, convinced that dreams were for other people. But I learned something important. Sometimes the world just needs to see you differently. And sometimes, you need to see yourself differently." She led them through the studio, showing them the makeup stations where Maya had first transformed her, the shooting areas where Paolo had captured her soul, the runway where she'd learned to walk in her own truth. "The fashion industry isn't easy," she told them as they settled into a conference room overlooking the city. "It's competitive, it's demanding, and it's not always kind. But it's also magical. It's about telling stories, about making people feel beautiful, about creating moments that last forever." One of the girls, a young woman named Carmen with bright eyes and careful posture, raised her hand. "What if we're not pretty enough? What if we don't fit the mold?" Lena smiled, remembering asking herself the same question every morning in the mirror. "Let me tell you a secret," she said. "The mold is breaking. The industry is changing. They don't want perfect anymore. They want real. They want stories. They want you." As the morning progressed, Lena watched these young women begin to bloom. They asked questions, tried on sample clothes, practiced poses, and slowly began to see themselves not as outsiders looking in, but as potential insiders with something valuable to offer. During lunch, Lena stepped outside to take a call from her mother. The experimental treatment had been working, slowly, but working. The medical bills were no longer a source of panic, and her mother had even started talking about getting back to her painting. "Mija," her mother said, her voice stronger than it had been in years, "I saw the morning show interview. You were so poised, so confident. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." "I'm still the same person, Mommy," Lena said, watching the city bustle below. "I just learned to see myself the way you always saw me." "No," her mother said firmly. "You're better than I ever dreamed you could be. You're changing the world, one girl at a time." When Lena returned to the studio, she found the girls in the midst of an impromptu photo shoot. Paolo, who had become a regular volunteer with the foundation, was teaching them how to find their light, how to connect with the camera, how to tell their stories without words. "Natural is beautiful," he was saying to Carmen, who was posed in front of a simple backdrop. "Don't think about being a model. Think about being yourself." The camera clicked, and even from across the room, Lena could see the magic happening. Carmen's face lit up with the same wonder Lena had felt 6 months ago, the recognition of her own worth, her own beauty, her own potential. "She's got it," Paolo said, showing Lena the shot on his camera. "They all do. You're building something incredible here." As the day wound down, Lena gathered the girls for a final conversation. They sat in a circle, the formal atmosphere of the morning replaced by something more intimate, more real. "I want you to remember today," Lena said. "Not because of the clothes or the cameras or the glamour, but because of how you felt. You felt seen. You felt valued. You felt beautiful. That feeling belongs to you. Nobody can take it away. Carmen raised her hand again. What if we don't make it? What if we're not good enough? Then you'll make it in other ways, Lena said simply. This isn't just about modeling. This is about believing in yourself, about taking up space in the world, about refusing to be invisible. Whether you become a model or a teacher or a doctor or anything else, you'll do it knowing your own worth. As the girls prepared to leave, each one hugged Lena goodbye. But Carmen lingered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she said simply, for showing us that dreams aren't just for other people. Dreams are for everyone, Lena replied. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us. After the girls left, Lena stood alone in the studio, surrounded by the tools of her new trade. The lights, the cameras, the endless racks of beautiful clothes. But what she treasured most were the memories. The moment Victor had mistaken her for someone important, the feeling of silk against her skin, the sound of applause when she'd found her confidence on the runway. And now, the look in Carmen's eyes when she'd realized her own potential. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ivana. Dinner tomorrow? I have a proposition for you. Lena smiled. In the months since the runway show, she and Ivana had developed an unlikely friendship. The Russian model had become one of her strongest supporters, using her influence to help promote the foundation and advocate for diversity in the industry. As she gathered her things to leave, Lena caught sight of herself in one of the studio mirrors. She looked the same as always, dark hair, brown eyes, uncertain smile. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer forgotten. She was seen. She was valued. She was enough. And most importantly, she was using her voice to help others find theirs. The cleaning girl had become a supermodel. But more than that, she'd become a catalyst for change, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful transformations happen when we're brave enough to let ourselves be seen. As she walked toward the elevator, Lena passed the security guard who had watched her transformation from the beginning. Have a good evening, Miss Martinez, he said with a respectful nod. You too, James, she replied, remembering his name because she'd learned that everyone deserved to be seen, to be known, to be valued. The elevator doors closed, and as she descended toward the street, Lena reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It had started with a mistake, a case of mistaken identity that had revealed her true self. But maybe it hadn't been a mistake at all. Maybe it had been recognition. Maybe Victor had seen something in her that she was only beginning to see in herself. Maybe she had always been meant for this moment, this life, this chance to show the world that beauty comes in all forms, that dreams are for everyone, and that sometimes the most extraordinary transformations happen to the most ordinary people. The elevator reached the ground floor, and Lena stepped out into the bustling city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, she was going home to her mother, to the woman who had always believed in her, who had always seen her as beautiful, who had always known that her daughter was destined for something extraordinary. The girl who had once been invisible had become impossible to ignore. And in the process, she had learned the most important lesson of all. She had always been enough. She had always been beautiful. She had always been worthy of being seen. She just needed the world to catch up. As she walked down the street, her phone buzzed with notifications, interview requests, collaboration offers, messages from young women inspired by her story. The girl who had once cleaned up after other people's dreams was now helping others build their own. And that, Lena thought as she smiled at the setting sun, was the most beautiful transformation of all. If you made it to the end, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. See you in the next one.